He divorced her, not knowing she was the heiress to a fortune. Before we continue, please remember to like, share and subscribe. The small-town diner was quiet, the kind of place where the clink of cutlery and soft murmurs of conversation created a sense of comfort, a stark contrast to the tension now hanging thick in the air. Jake sat across from Emily, the woman he had once called his wife, but the connection between them felt like a distant memory. He stirred his coffee absently, his eyes distant, as though he were already somewhere else. Emily, on the other hand, couldn't hide the hurt on her face. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity until Jake finally broke it, his words cutting through the stillness like a blade. "We're done, Emily," Jake said, his voice casual, almost indifferent. "This marriage isn't working. I want a divorce." Emily blinked, her heart tightening in her chest. She stared at him, trying to process what he had just said. "Why?" Her voice trembled, but she kept her composure. She had known something was off for weeks now, but hearing it spoken aloud was a different kind of pain. Jake scoffed and leaned back in his chair, his smirk barely visible at the corner of his lips. "You're too simple, Emily. You're not ambitious. You don't fit into my world anymore. I need someone who understands my lifestyle, who's on my level." His words stung, but Emily didn't react. She remained still, her eyes not leaving his face, though her mind was reeling. It was as if all the love, all the years they'd spent together, had meant nothing to him. She had always known he was driven by his own ambition, but she had never imagined he would leave her behind for it. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice steady despite the wave of emotion threatening to break through. Jake didn't hesitate. "Yeah. I'm sure." The words hit Emily like a punch to the gut, but she remained composed. She nodded once, her lips trembling slightly as she fought back the tears that threatened to spill. Without another word, she stood up, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. The weight of the situation hung heavily on her chest, but she refused to let him see her break down. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She turned away from him and walked toward the door, each step feeling like it took her further and further from the life she thought they had shared. Jake didn't move. He didn't call after her. He didn't try to stop her. He simply watched her go, his expression unreadable. As Emily stepped out into the cold night, the door to the diner swung shut behind her with a soft thud. She didn't look back. Her heart was heavy with the finality of what had just happened, but she refused to let the tears fall. She walked down the quiet street, the chill of the night air biting at her skin, but it was nothing compared to the pain she felt inside. She had loved Jake. She had believed in their future, had believed in him. But now, that future seemed like a distant dream, shattered in an instant by his cold indifference. Her thoughts were a blur as she walked aimlessly, not sure where she was going or what she was supposed to do now. The world seemed so vast, so overwhelming, and she felt small and insignificant in the face of it all. But as her footsteps echoed through the empty street, there was a sense of clarity creeping in. This was the end of one chapter, but perhaps it was also the beginning of another. The diner, the small town, the life she had built with Jake, none of it was hers anymore. But Emily was still here. She was still breathing, still standing, and for the first time in a long time, she realized that maybe she didn't need Jake to define her. Maybe she didn't need anyone. As the night stretched on, Emily's silhouette faded into the distance, leaving Jake alone in the diner, his coffee now cold, the taste of finality settling heavily in the air. He thought he had made the right choice, but as the door closed behind her, something lingered in his chest. A nagging feeling he couldn't quite shake. As Emily walked away from the diner, her heart heavy with the weight of Jake's words, she didn't head in the direction of the small town she had known for years. Instead, she made her way to a sleek black car waiting at the curb. It was a striking contrast to the clunky sedan she had always driven, the car she and Jake used to share. The driver, a man in a tailored suit, stepped out and opened the door for her without a word. She slid into the back seat, the interior of the car polished and immaculate. As the vehicle glided through the quiet streets, Emily gazed out of the window, the town she had spent most of her life in slipping away behind her. The soft hum of the engine was the only sound breaking the silence, but her mind raced. Jake's words echoed in her head, too simple, not ambitious. She had once believed in their future, but now it seemed like that was just a dream. The car drove on, the familiar streets fading into rural roads, until they arrived at a sprawling estate nestled at the edge of the city. Emily glanced out the window at the massive gates that led into a world so different from the one she had just left behind. The driver pulled up to the entrance, where guards and staff stood at attention. The moment the car stopped, one of the guards opened the door, and Emily stepped out, her heels clicking softly on the gravel driveway. As she walked toward the grand entrance of the mansion, a wave of familiarity washed over her. This was her world, the world she had kept hidden from everyone, including Jake. Inside, the house was a blend of luxury and sophistication, a far cry from the simplicity she had grown used to. Staff members greeted her with respectful nods, but Emily didn't pay them any attention. She was no longer the woman she had been just hours ago. She entered the study, where her father, Richard Langford, stood by the window, gazing out at the expansive grounds. Richard was a well-known figure, a reclusive billionaire with a reputation for being both powerful and elusive. He was the kind of man whose name carried weight, whose influence reached far beyond the boundaries of the business world. Yet, despite his public persona, he had kept his daughter's existence under wraps, away from the spotlight. When Emily stepped into the room, Richard didn't turn around at first. He knew why she was here. He had expected this day. Without a word, he took a sip from his glass and then turned to face her. "Emily," he said, his voice steady but tinged with a hint of something deeper, perhaps understanding, perhaps something else. "I knew this day would come." Emily met his gaze, her expression calm, but her mind was racing. She had known for years that she wasn't just anyone, that her family's wealth and power were more than just a safety net. They were a legacy. Yet she had spent so long hiding who she truly was. It was time for that to change. "I think it's time for you to step out of the shadows," Richard said, his words carrying the weight of a life that was about to shift. Emily nodded, a slow smile forming on her lips. She was ready to shed the life she had known, ready to embrace her true identity. The life with Jake, the life she thought she wanted, was gone. Now, it was time to face the reality of who she really was. After the breakup, Jake dove headfirst into his newfound freedom. He reveled in the attention, throwing himself into a whirlwind of parties, expensive nights out, and late-night gatherings with friends. The life of a bachelor suited him, or so he convinced himself. He would boast about the divorce, laughing off the relationship he had just ended. "Emily? She was just too boring," he would say, dismissing her with a flick of his hand. "Not my type at all. I need someone who can keep up with me." His friends, impressed by his newfound bravado, would cheer him on, fueling his arrogance. For Jake, this was just the beginning of a new, exciting chapter, one where he could have everything he wanted without the constraints of a relationship. But as the days passed, Jake's life began to unravel. What he had once believed was a victory soon felt like a hollow victory. His business ventures, once thriving, started crumbling. Investments he had been so sure of fell through, leaving him scrambling to make sense of his rapidly changing circumstances. The carefree bachelor life he had so eagerly embraced started to feel more like an empty shell. As if things weren't bad enough, a scandal broke, one that tarnished his reputation. A cheating scandal, brought to light by a social media post, left Jake humiliated and struggling to salvage what was left of his social standing. His friends, once so eager to praise his freedom, began to distance themselves, their support waning as the truth of his actions surfaced. One night, sitting alone in his apartment, the weight of his choices finally sank in. Jake scrolled aimlessly through his phone, hoping to escape the growing sense of failure creeping in. It was then that a headline caught his eye: "Mysterious Heiress steps out for the first time in years." He clicked on it without thinking, the image that accompanied the article making his heart skip a beat. There, in the photo, was Emily. She stood at the center of a glamorous gala, a striking figure in an elegant dress that shimmered under the lights. Her smile was radiant, her posture confident, and the way she carried herself was nothing like the quiet woman he had left behind. Emily was stunning, poised, and surrounded by an aura of power he had never seen. Jake's jaw dropped as he read the article, realizing that the woman he had so casually discarded was far more than he had ever imagined. The quiet, humble woman who had once seemed so simple was, in reality, the heir to a fortune, someone whose world was far beyond his comprehension. She wasn't just a woman who didn't fit his lifestyle. She was the kind of woman who commanded respect, who had power, and who could live a life Jake had only dreamed of. For the first time since their breakup, Jake felt a pang of regret, deep, unsettling regret. The woman he had dismissed so easily, the woman he had underestimated, had just stepped into a world that he could never be a part of. And now, with his life in freefall, Jake was left wondering if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The scene unfolds at a lavish charity gala held in the heart of the city, a stark contrast to the quiet town where Emily had once lived. The red carpet stretched out before her, flanked by flashing cameras and eager reporters, all clamoring for a piece of the Langford legacy. Beside her stood her father, Richard Langford, the reclusive billionaire who had long kept their family's wealth and power under wraps. Tonight, though, there was no hiding. The world was watching. Emily stood tall and poised, her elegant gown shimmering under the bright lights. Her hair was styled perfectly, her makeup flawless, but it wasn't just her beauty that commanded attention. It was the confidence she radiated, the calm composure that seemed so natural to her, yet so foreign to the people who had only known her as Jake's simple wife. As the cameras clicked and the reporters shouted her name, Emily remained unfazed. They threw questions at her about her family, her charity work, and her sudden appearance in the public eye. She answered each one with grace, her voice steady and assured. There was no sign of the woman who had once walked away from a breakup in the quiet of a diner. The woman standing before the media was someone entirely different, someone in control, someone with power and purpose. "Ms. Langford, what motivated you to step into the spotlight now?" one reporter asked. Emily smiled politely, her eyes glinting with a mixture of mystery and confidence. "I've spent a lot of time in the shadows, but I believe now is the right moment to step forward. There's much to be done, and I want to be a part of the change." As the questions continued, Jake stood off to the side, watching her. He had just learned the truth: Emily was the heir to a fortune, a woman with a legacy far beyond anything he had ever imagined. He could hardly believe his eyes. The woman he had dismissed, the woman he had left behind as too simple for his world, was now the center of attention, glowing in the spotlight, commanding the room with ease. Jake's mind raced as he took in the scene. He couldn't reconcile the woman before him with the quiet, humble wife he had walked away from. Emily, the mysterious heiress, was a figure he could never have dreamed of, and as he watched her navigate the frenzy of the gala with such grace, he couldn't help but feel a deep, gnawing sense of regret. The cameras continued to flash, but Jake's attention was entirely on Emily. He watched her laugh with guests, her every movement exuding a level of elegance and power he had never seen. It was as though she had become someone else entirely, someone far removed from the life he had known with her. As Emily made her way through the crowd, the camera lingered on Jake's stunned face. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks: he had misjudged her, underestimated her, and now he was standing on the sidelines of a world he could never be a part of. Jake's chest tightened as he watched her walk away, her head held high, moving with the certainty of someone who had long known her worth. She was no longer the woman he had discarded so easily. And for the first time since their breakup, Jake understood the true depth of his mistake. In the weeks following the gala, Jake's life continued to spiral, but his regret over losing Emily only grew more intense. He couldn't stop thinking about her transformation. From the quiet, simple woman he had dismissed to the poised, confident heiress who now graced headlines. Determined to make things right, Jake relentlessly tried to reach out to her. He sent text messages that went unanswered, emails that were ignored, and even flowers delivered to her doorstep with heartfelt notes begging for another chance. He called her multiple times, his voice filled with urgency as he pleaded for her forgiveness, claiming that he was wrong and that he wanted to fix things. He swore he would change, that he'd be a better man, but still, there was no response from Emily. Meanwhile, Emily remained steadfast in her decision to move forward. She was no longer the woman Jake had once known. She had embraced her new role in her father's empire, taking an active role in the Langford family businesses and dedicating herself to charity work. Her days were filled with meetings, events, and responsibilities that Jake could never have imagined her having. Emily had shed her past, and she had no intention of looking back. Despite her silence, Jake refused to give up. His pride wouldn't allow it. One evening, he decided to show up uninvited at the Langford estate, hoping to have a face-to-face conversation with Emily. He stood at the grand gates, his heart pounding, as he waited for permission to enter. The guards, who once wouldn't have given him a second glance, now eyed him with suspicion. After a tense few moments, Emily's assistant finally relayed the message. Emily would meet him, but only in private. When Jake finally stepped into the opulent surroundings of the Langford estate, he couldn't help but feel out of place. Everything about it screamed wealth and power, worlds apart from the small town he had shared with Emily. His nervousness crept in, but he quickly shook it off, telling himself he had to make her understand. Emily appeared before him in a sleek, tailored dress, her presence commanding yet calm. She didn't offer him a smile, no words of greeting. Instead, she led him to a private sitting room, the air thick with tension. Jake's heart raced as he opened his mouth to speak, eager to express how much he regretted his actions. But before he could say anything, Emily interrupted, her voice steady and firm. "Jake," she said, looking him squarely in the eye. "I'm done. With you, with our past, and with everything you think you know about me." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. She wasn't angry, but the finality in her tone left no room for negotiation. "You made your choice when you saw me as nothing more than a small-town girl, someone who wasn't your type," she continued, her voice unwavering. "I'm not that person anymore. I've outgrown everything we had. I don't need to fix what was never broken in the first place." Jake's mind raced, but the reality of her words hit him hard. There was no going back, no second chance. Emily was no longer the woman who had waited for him to choose her, she had chosen herself. As she turned to leave, Jake stood frozen, realizing that in his quest to have it all, he had lost the one thing that had truly mattered. Emily had long since shed her past, embracing her new life as the heiress to one of the wealthiest empires in the world. No longer the quiet, overlooked wife of Jake, she had stepped into a role of power and influence that she had once never imagined for herself. She began taking on leadership roles in her father's company, earning the respect of board members and employees alike. Emily's vision was clear, she wanted to push the company into new, forward-thinking territories. But her ambitions didn't stop at the boardroom. She used her newfound position to advocate for causes close to her heart, including charity work that focused on supporting underprivileged communities. Her efforts were not just about wealth or status, but about making a tangible difference in the lives of those who needed it most. Flashbacks to her earlier life revealed the transformation she had undergone. We saw the quiet woman who had once silently accepted Jake's neglect, believing she wasn't enough. But as she took on her new roles, these quiet moments became the foundation of her strength. She had weathered the pain of rejection and had emerged stronger, more determined. Emily had once walked away from a man who had failed to see her value. Now, she was a woman who demanded respect in every room she entered. As she attended high-profile events, her presence was magnetic. She spoke at women's empowerment conferences, captivating audiences with her story of resilience and success. Emily had become a role model, a respected figure in both the business world and the philanthropic community. Her influence was growing, and her reputation for being not just an heiress, but a powerhouse in her own right, spread quickly. Meanwhile, Jake's life had taken a sharp downturn. His business ventures continued to fail, his reputation tarnished by scandal, and the carefree bachelor life he had once enjoyed was now a distant memory. He had lost the one person who had been a constant in his life, and now he watched from afar as Emily flourished in ways he had never expected. One evening, as Jake scrolled through social media, he saw yet another picture of Emily, this time attending a grand gala. She stood tall in a stunning gown, surrounded by influential people, exuding confidence and grace. She was the picture of success, happy and at ease in the world she had crafted for herself. Jake's eyes lingered on the image. The woman he had discarded so easily was now a force to be reckoned with, and he realized, with a sickening twist in his stomach, just how much he had lost. The confident, beautiful woman in the picture was a far cry from the quiet, humble woman he had once known. He had misjudged her then, and now it was clear, she was thriving in ways he could never have imagined. As the scene ended, Emily's smile radiated from the screen, a clear reflection of the woman she had become. A woman who was fully in control of her life, her destiny, and her future. Jake could only watch from the sidelines, a silent witness to the life he had foolishly let slip away. Years have passed since Jake's divorce from Emily, and the life he once envisioned for himself has unraveled. The promising career he had once been so proud of has become a distant memory, his dreams of success long abandoned. Now, he works at a small, local job just to make ends meet. His days are spent doing work that feels far beneath the ambition he once held. The life of excitement, wealth, and status he had always thought he would enjoy has slipped through his fingers, leaving him in a quiet, modest existence. One evening, as Jake sits in his dimly lit apartment, he turns on the television. A familiar face fills the screen, Emily. Her elegance and poise are evident, as she speaks about the importance of staying true to oneself, of embracing the opportunities life offers, and making choices that align with one's true potential. Jake listens, transfixed, as her words resonate deeply within him. He watches her with a sense of awe, realizing how far she's come, how much she has achieved, and how little he now has in comparison. The image of Emily on the screen brings back memories of their time together, the moments of laughter, the quiet moments of connection that now feel like a lifetime ago. He glances over to a small table where an old photo of the two of them together sits in a worn frame. It's from happier days, before the breakup, before the mistakes, before everything fell apart. His fingers hover over the picture, the weight of his regret pressing down on him. For a long moment, Jake contemplates picking up the phone. He wants to call her, wants to reach out and tell her everything he never said. He wants to apologize, to beg for another chance, to explain the depth of his remorse. But as his finger hovers over the dial, something inside him holds him back. He knows it's too late. He knows that the woman he once knew has become someone unrecognizable to him, and that reaching out now would be pointless. She is no longer the person he abandoned, and he is no longer the man who could have stood beside her. With a heavy heart, Jake places the phone down. His gaze shifts back to the photo in his hand, and after a long pause, he slowly sets it down and pushes it to the side. His eyes are clouded with sorrow as he reaches for the delete button on his phone, erasing any remnants of their past that still linger. The photo is gone, as if it never existed, and with it, so too is the last thread of hope he had held on to. The camera zooms in on Jake's face as he sits in silence, the weight of his decisions bearing down on him. His eyes stare into the void, and for the first time in a long while, he truly comprehends the finality of his actions. The man he was, the life they could have had, is gone forever. The screen fades to black, leaving viewers with a haunting question: what could have been? And what was lost forever? If you've enjoyed this story and the emotional roller coaster it took you on, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue telling stories that inspire, challenge, and move us all. Thank you for being a part of this journey.